Laser cut is the designation given to our system that calculates cutting all the way through the mesh. Right here I am drawing a 2D shape. However, if I do not extrude and I just click, it cuts through the shape. And if we use Everscroll to recall this cutter, we can see that the cutter is nicely proportioned to fit the shape. And the system that makes that work is called Accucut. It just knows how far to cut through the shape. And this works in a variety of methods. I mean, if we wanted to get crazy with it, we could take this shape, rotate it out in space, get all nuts with it, and still draw, and it will still be able to calculate an accurate Accu shape, which is one of my favorite ways of testing this tool. However, what if you wanted Accucut to not cut all the way through your shape? Well, by pressing D, you can go to the laser cut option, and by typing in something like, say, 0.35, we're now cutting 0.35 meters through this. And let's change our solver to exact to just make it a little bit more sane for us. And now whenever we click and we apply, we're now cutting to 0.35 depth. So all of our cuts are meeting, and because we're using the exact solver, they meet nicely, which is one of the benefits of using exact. Sometimes there's cases in which exact is definitely the only solver that can solve a particular case, and those are the cases in which you should definitely take the speed hit in order to enjoy the luxuries of the exact solver. But in cases in which it's not needed, it's definitely not recommended. But we can see that we're able to just cut consistently to a depth that's able to just be adhered to by laser cut. So instead of just cutting all the way through the shape, we're able to limit our cut. And that's one of the first features related with laser cut depth. So if we just change this to 0, we've basically reset it. And so now we can actually talk about this toggle at the end. This toggle will turn laser cut into AccuDepth. AccuDepth is a modification of the Accucut system in which we wanted to try to create a automatic depth situation. So by toggling on AutoDepth in the MiniHelper, it changes the way that you draw shapes. In fact, I'm going to need to make a new file in order to press D and change my solver to fast, and then we could talk about this in a more focused fashion without speed hits, stuttering everything that I'm trying to do. So now that we have activated AutoDepth, that means whenever we click and drag, we're now able to have our depth automatically specified via a multiplier based on the longest edge of the draw. So it's very different than Accucut depth. However, this one is definitely one worth getting in and playing with, especially if you're just trying to perform a bunch of cuts in quick succession without having to get in and deal with any of the rigmarole that's associated with depth and having to think about it and deal with that final click. With this, we can just get in, just keep pressing W to change our wedge if we wanted, press Alt VE in order to get better shading, but just like that, we're able to just quickly draw cuts without having to even think about the overhead of dealing with depth. And that's really the beauty of what AutoDepth is all about. One of my favorite parts about it is that if we were to change it to something like 0.3, we're now going to be drawing at a third of the depth that we were previously using. So if we were to change this to say something like join, that means that we can now draw join boxes that are now sticking out, not as far as they would have if we would have left that setting at 1. So in the event that you're needing to draw sequential shapes, but also need to put some sort of multiplier or divisor on it, you're able to do that from the comfort of the MiniHelper. These options pertain to flipping the depth around, so if you wanted to calculate based on the larger depth of the edge, you can do that, which will result in a larger shape because it's calculating based on the alternative edge than it was previously. But for the most part, I find that just keeping things at default and changing this parameter gets me to where I need to go to. The last option to talk about is the custom proportions, which is really, to me, the future of what custom cutter is going to become. You're eventually going to be able to draw shape and there won't be any depth to have to think about. We don't want to draw in green or in join, so we'll change that to cut. But there will come a day when you will be able to just draw custom just like this without having to even toggle auto depth, just it by itself. However, with custom, there are a series of additional behaviors that I want to deal with first and also allow to still be available before we start one-to-one users, because I mean, you can always hold shift and move things freely, so we still want users to be able to enjoy that flexibility as well. But whenever you use shift to proportionally move things, it also activates shift to live, causing me to have to press 1 to jump back to my original layer. But just letting you know that auto depth is available for you, and it also expands all the way to custom in the event that you want to just draw custom shapes without even having to worry about any sort of automatic depth calculation. You want to just draw it one-to-one of its original shape. all you have to do is just activate the custom proportions and it will be 1:1. Otherwise, it will use the longest edge to calculate depth just like it would with any of the other shapes. But for that reason, that is why laser cut and auto depth is part of the new Boxhelper as sliders.